Hello, dear viewer. This is a continuation, sort of my Spider-Man video of how would I do Spider-Man. Now, I could definitely make more videos on that, and I've thought about it, but I also wanted to cover some other characters and events I would have happened in this universe, my own little Marvel universe, if Marvel ever hired me to make my own little universe, and basically to, I don't know, revitalize the comics or something. The major feature of this universe that I don't know if I stated out in the original video, but I want to make extra clear here, is that this isn't replacing the movies or the comics. This isn't like, oh, this is how I'll replace the 616 continuity. This is, what if I was given my own little Marvel universe and then told to make it interesting? Not supposed to be a replacement, just its own little thing. Like how the Marvel zombie stories don't overtake the 616 continuity. Anyway. So these two, of course, as you can see from the title, this video will cover two heroes, Iron Man and Captain America, who will both, of course, get to be major characters in this universe as like spin-off titles or whatever. Or at some point, they would get covered. Now, they would not be at first because Spider-Man comes first in my little continuity, even if Captain America comes earlier. But they don't really become main characters until after the events of Spider-Man starts taking place. The first one he meets would be actually Iron Man. Despite age and continuity, this will make sense in a little bit. But basically, this would happen after quite at least a few adventures of Spider-Man. He's like, we've had time to see some of his classic villains. So within like the first episode, boom, Iron Man. But what happens is during the same episode or issue or whatever, where we meet, where the rivalry between Spider-Man and James Jonah Jameson fully takes place, where it truly starts, is really, now up to this point, the media was uncertain about Spider-Man. J. Jonah Jameson had not a strong dislike to Spider-Man like he does develop. This is the episode he develops it. And then we'll talk about Spider-Man. Basically, a supervillain, whatever, is attacking the studio, or the fight gets brought into the studio, and in the studio, J. Jonah is doing an interview, and, well, basically, the thing gets trashed, J. Jonah is publicly embarrassed, it's a whole mess for him. Now, keyword, Spider-Man did not cause this. He was just fighting a supervillain. But J. Jonah made thought Spider-Man was, or doesn't care, just wants to pin it on him. And so, this is when J. Jonah develops his rivalry as the studio is breaking down. This is when he swears, hell, get that Spider-Man! And that's kind of the rivalry of J. Jonah Jameson starting. But what we don't immediately, either will be a small detail or not immediately shown, is who he's interviewing. That is actually Tony Stark. Tony Stark, in this continuity, is, well, a billionaire playboy philanthropist. Nothing must change. He is that egotistical Tony at the start of the movies or early comics or that kind of thing. He is simply the jerk professional Tony before he becomes Iron Man. And he's just a full-on that kind of attitude. He he sells weapons to the military, really anyone who'll buy them, including General Ross. Yeah, I'm knowing him. Put a pin in that. And all this kind of stuff, and he's just living his life. However, in an interview with J. Jonah Jameson, probably about something unconsequential, during the fight, the studio, of course, does some damage, and Tony Stark is injured. How badly or what significance the injury is exactly is unspecified. I haven't figured that out yet. Could be anything from just bits of the studio collapsing to an attack, or Spider-Man accidentally trying to save him, gets him hurt somehow, kind of like what happened to Gwen in the main continuity. But whatever the way, Tony is injured heavily from this attack. This causes Tony, possibly some other injuries, but the major one being his heart is destroyed, just wrecked. I know the movies, I believe the comics, have tried to have the arc reactor designed as a sort of thing that keeps the metal fight from getting into his heart. In this continuity, no, his heart was just destroyed in the attack. It was just wrecked beyond repair. And the only thing that could be done was to replace it with the arc reactor. The arc reactor, of course, being, well, the arc reactor we know, but it doesn't act as a magnet. It has fully replaced his heart. Meaning, if you took out the arc reactor, he would literally die because he'd be missing a heart. And Tony is not happy about this at all. Like, it's just not pleasing him whatsoever. Now, obviously, in this, I'm changing how, of course, he gets the injury that leads to his arc reactor. But also, in this continuity, if you remember the whole wild mutant problem I mentioned earlier, which I'll go into more detail whenever I get around to discussing the X-Men and the mutants in this continuity directly. But Tony was part of the development. One of his branches of the company was a suit that would make suits that was designed to protect people from if it was an airborne pathogen. Think like masks for 10 times, or like those environmental suits you see. And yes, they are purposely designed to look somewhat like AIM suits. This is not unintentional. But anyway, so Tony is just ticked off about this stupid Spider-Man, who he also blames in the attack. So he is ticked, pissed, and wants revenge. So, with a little bit of ingenuity, some spare time healing on his side, and the fact he has an engine in his chest, is now just ready to beat up Spider-Man. So he just scraps to get, like, literally overnight, over a few nights or whatever, scraps a whole bunch of armor and pieces of random tech he has lying around his living room together, with some different equipment and his welding masters, and basically forms this universe Mark 1 armor, and just goes to where he thinks Spider-Man will be next time he hears Spider-Man, and just engages with a fight with him. And the fight doesn't really go in Tony's favor. Like, Spider-Man may not be a professional, but he's had a few weeks to months to get good at this, at least decent, so he can take on some random billionaire in powerful armor. I mean, notable, people do not know about Tony's identity in this universe. So simply put, Tony just loses the fight. He just loses. But during one of the moves, he realized something funny about the armor. It acts differently when you put it, like, it just kind of got like an energy boost mid-fight. Tony, after limping back to his office to, lick his wounds and, swear revenge on Spider-Man and whatnot, he makes note of that. He's a scientist. So he looks into why that is, and he learns that since the arc reactor is in his chest and is kind of connected to his nervous system and all that jazz, that when he puts on suits or other things like that, he can connect to the armor itself and give it a severe power boost, as well as move so much more efficiently than a normal person could in a suit. So he takes its advantage, learns how to make better armor, and over the course of, which will probably in Spider-Man time, a few different stories, eventually builds a more proper armor. This being a more classic Iron Man suit. He uses this to then actually give Spider-Man a proper fight, and he either wins this fight barely, or Spider-Man wins this fight barely. But whoever wins doesn't matter. In this fight, Iron Man then, like when Iron Man could have beat Spider-Man or something, when Spider-Man's injured, he goes out to try to help someone. Very subtly. Something like that. And, well, that kind of thing, Iron Man learns that Spider-Man isn't actually the bad guy here. And Iron Man feels like a world jerk from this situation. He isn't heartless completely. And so, after thinking about it some, he decides that, kid, I'll leave you alone. This, of course, leaves Iron Man with nothing, with kind of curious nature to do. However, his random ability of technology has kind of let some people get away with some of his tech, as he has tendency to basically throw it away. So, a bunch of people now running around with some of his random tech. Some people he doesn't like doing that. And so, Iron Man, or Tony Stark, deciding that, you know what, I don't care. If Spider-Man, if a teenager can be a hero, so can I. So he dons the Iron Man suit once again, and of course goes out to be Iron Man, essentially. There's no notable changes to his powers or abilities in this timeline. A lot of my characters I don't say depowered, but lowered, so they don't like breaking planets. But Iron Man's probably mostly the same. So he's not, there's not much significant changes. This is mostly just his backstory I've mentioned. And something similar is going to happen with Cap here, because now we have to get into our good old Captain America, my favorite superhero. So, I said Spider-Man was the first superhero. Well, that's technically true, but I did try to specify he was the first public superhero. There are a few older than him. One of them is Captain America, who was, quite frankly, just a kid from Brooklyn. He tried to join the army, they wouldn't let him. He got into the super soldier program, and he became Captain America. Which, in this universe, is not at first an extension of the Weapon X program. It actually comes later. This is literally just essentially mad science experiments. U.S. trying to find a way to get the upper hand on the Nazis. So, like I said, in this timeline, he becomes Captain America. The scientist Maya dies. All the research about this thing is burned in a fire or something. And Captain America is the only living or still current example of any of the super soldier work. So he goes and fights World War II, punches Nazis. That's how it goes. Gets in a battle with Red Skull. This all stays roughly the same. Loses Bucky. You get the idea. Ends up getting frozen in ice, and basically all that stays the same. I'm not making any significant changes here. However, what does change is, now remember, in this timeline of story, it's set in the year 2020, not our 2020, because like the virus didn't happen. None of that nonsense happened. Just pretend it didn't happen. But in their 2000, Oscorp, yeah, those guys, remember them? Oscorp finds the frozen body of Captain America in an Antarctic experiment. Now, this sounds like what would happen is he busts down and like, welcome to the world, Captain. But no, in this timeline, Oscorp kind of unthaws his body, but generally keeps Captain America unconscious for most of it, but uses his blood to try to reverse engineer the super soldier program, because they want to figure out how to make the super soldier serum. However, due to the fact that it's bonded to Captain America's DNA, because that's how the super soldier serum works, it bonds to the person's DNA. So they're basically always getting a contaminated batch, which would basically be toxic to anyone who actually used it. It would basically trigger an immune response on both sides. So Oscorp tries several different experiments, trying to find a way to, get past it, try to find a way to purify the super soldier serum from his blood or make something useful out of it. And this leads to Oscorp needing test subjects, but due to illegal activity, can't do that kind of thing. So they start putting it into some of their subsidiary companies' products. Who would know that the extra super frosting on your cupcakes that was linked by Oscorp actually has some taint, was actually one of its secret ingredients was a extract from Captain America's blood type thing, or made for research from it. Or who would know that your fragrance, or something like that. Basically, a wide-scale testing operation. Mostly happened in Western countries, but did have some outreach otherwhere, which, due to the fact that the super soldier serum is, by its nature, is highly mutagenic. It mutates the body. That's how Captain America went from, Steve Rogers to Captain America. But since all these forms were unstable, they didn't have much of an effect on people, at least not the way they wanted them to. No, I didn't say entirely, because it would occasionally, and by occasionally I mean fairly often, express certain traits that were unknown to the user, essentially creating wild mutants. I've made some distinction that two types of mutants in the universe, and trust me, I will cover that when we get to like the X-Men or something, when I actually discuss the mutants more in detail. But essentially, causing the wild mutants from what starts, if you remember the start of my Spider-Man episode. So essentially, all of the wild mutants, or most of the mutant problems, and a lot of the villains, all kind of made from extracts of Captain America's blood, or the super soldier serum. This, of course, eventually breaks down when Spider-Man, investigating Oscorp, finds Captain America's body. And, of course, unthaws him. They have a team-up moment, and Captain America breaks out, is now on the run. And so, now we get actually Captain America again. He is pretty much the same. Personality-wise, I'm not going to change much of anything. But what happened is now Captain America's in this whole new world, and there's no shield, or the shield isn't big enough that they don't, contact him, and no one's really around immediately to get his bearings. So the story follows Captain America trying to adjust to this new world where he thought he died in the 1940s. And having to deal with the wild mutants and other crazy experiments like that, which he feels partially responsible for, even if unintentionally. And so that kind of becomes Captain America's first story, him trying to get his bearings in the new world, and also hunting down the wild experiments made from his DNA. Essentially, that would be Captain America's first major arc in the story. A lot of my characters have an arc. If they were like the star of if there's like a separate comic book, this would be like the first major arc. This would be like Captain America's arc. Or like, maybe we call it like Welcome Back Cap or something. Something like that. And this will go on for a while until he eventually runs into the Hulk. And that's where I'll leave it off, because covering the Hulk is probably my next part. The next part will probably be me covering Thor and the Hulk, and what I do with those two characters, which I'm probably making a bit more few changes than I did Iron Man Captain America. As you see, I didn't change Iron Man Captain America much from each other, the normal continuities. I mostly just readjusted things to fit better in the world I've set up, where things started out like our world and then have changed. keeping things subtle, keeping things more in line and interconnected, like it should be, or at least in my preferred Marvel universe. But I hope you enjoyed that little discussion. We will hopefully cover more of this later, and if you want to have me give you more details about either Iron Man or Captain America, like Spider-Man, just comment. I'll happily give it. I enjoy talking about this. Okay, that's well. Signing out.